You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Shortly after 1 p.m. Eastern on today, news began to spread that California Senator Kamala Harris was dropping out of the 2020 presidential race. This is the video she released to her supporters when the news went public.
"11 months ago at the launch of our campaign in Oakland, I told you all that I am not perfect, but I will always speak with decency and moral clarity and treat all people with dignity and respect, that I will lead with integrity and I will speak the truth." And so that's what I've tried to do every day of this campaign, and here's the truth today. I've taken stock and I've looked at this from every angle, and over the last few days, I have come to one of the hardest decisions of my life. So here's the deal, guys. My campaign for president simply does not have the financial resources to continue, and the financial resources we need to continue. I'm not a billionaire. I can't fund my own campaign. And as the campaign has gone on, it has become harder and harder to raise the money we need to compete. In good faith, I cannot tell you, my supporters and volunteers, that I have a path forward if I don't believe I do. So, to you, my supporters, my dear supporters, it is with deep regret, but also with deep gratitude, that I am suspending our campaign today. But I want to be clear with you. I am still very much in this fight, and I will keep fighting every day for what this campaign has been about. Justice for the people, all the people. Our campaign has been about fighting for people whose voices have not been heard or are too often ignored, and we will keep up that fight. Let's remember, we were the first to put the injustice of inadequate teacher pay on the national agenda, and we will certainly keep up that fight. We were the first to demand justice for our children, declaring we would take bold executive actions to stop gun violence. We will keep up that fight. We were the first to demand justice for women with a plan to block unconstitutional state abortion laws. We will keep up that fight. And our campaign uniquely spoke to the experiences of Black women and people of color, and their importance to the success and the future of this party. Our campaign demanded no one should be taken for granted by any political party. We will keep up that fight because no one should be made to fight alone. And I believe our campaign showed every child in America, regardless of their color or gender, that there are no limits to who can lead and hold positions of power in our country. In that way, this campaign has been so much bigger than me. So I'm extremely grateful to the hundreds of staff who have moved and uprooted your lives and sacrificed time away from your families. I know our fight has been personal for each one of you, and I could not have done this without my husband, Doug, and my entire family and friends who gave up so much to embark on this journey with me and have supported me every step of the way. And I am grateful to the thousands of volunteers and contributors who have chipped in, who have knocked on doors, who have made calls, and who have put their faith and trust in me. It has been the honor of my life to be your candidate. And I want to be clear, although I am no longer running for president, I will do everything in my power to defeat Donald Trump and fight for the future of our country and the best of who we are. And I know you will too. So let's do that together. Let's keep fighting for the America we believe in, an America free of injustice, an America that we know can be unburdened by what has been. Thank you, guys.
It, of course, was no surprise, but more shock for lots of folks. There have been a number of stories written about her political obituary in the last several weeks. Politico has written several stories. The New York Times had a devastating story recently that even included the resignation letter of one of her white staffers who left to go work on the campaign of Mike Bloomberg. A lot of black women not happy with today's news. Also, there were black men who certainly supported her and others as well. So we want to talk about this right now. Joining us in studio, Melanie Campbell, President, CEO, National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, also Black Women's Roundtable. Also, L. Joy Williams, she joins us. She's, of course, President of the Brooklyn NAACP, but also a member of Higher Heights, one of the organizations that endorsed Senator Kamala Harris, and Glynda Carr joining us on the phone, FaceTime, President and CEO of Higher Heights of America. And so I want to start first with you, Glynda. And that is, we were, of course, at the breakfast in Atlanta that took place after the debate there. Packed room of black women who were there to support Senator Kamala Harris. But it was interesting because I saw a story. There was one sister who was there, but she also came out of there saying she was going to be supporting other candidates. What do you think brought us to this day? You heard what the senator had to say, but what brought us to this point where you had, after Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, and then, of course, Kara Mosley Braun, who ran in 2004, and now Senator Kamala Harris dropping out, some say this early, before even one state voted?
I mean, I think it's a couple of things. So, yes, Roland, I think we do need to celebrate the moment that, in 1972, Shirley Chisholm boldly stepped out and, as a black woman from Brooklyn who did not look like the face of leadership that America was used to, declared her candidacy. Fast forward 47 years later, you have a Kamala Harris who, when it's all said and done, the day that she dropped out, she was still, if you look at a top candidate, a top-tiered candidate, a front runner. She's a serious candidate. But what reminds us today is that there's still barriers that exist for women, people of color, women of color, and particularly black women, as relates to people's perceptions of our viability as candidates. And when we allow mainstream media and polls to dictate who should be the front runner, what happens is it creates the dynamic that is already a barrier for women of color to raise money and to be viable. We are probably going to see more money raised and spent, because many of the candidates are self-funded in this election cycle more than ever. So as we celebrate the diversity of the stage, we need to recognize that, Secretary Castro, Senator Harris, and Senator Booker are all, still fighting to ensure that they have the resources they need to be able to introduce themselves to the electorate.
Melanie, here's a reality, though, and that is, if Senator Kamala Harris was polling at 15 or 18% just in South Carolina, she's still in this race. You had the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, who just endorsed Bloomberg, who said, I don't know what the hell's going on with how bad Harris and Booker are doing in South Carolina, where black people are going to make up potentially half of all voters in the Democratic primary. And so why do you think she even struggled for black support? What do you think happened here?
Well, I'm going to, first of all, I want to thank Higher Heights for stepping out there and boldly endorsing. I think that was a powerful moment. Also, for black women, to see black women stepping up. So I want to thank Kamala Harris for stepping up and running. I polls say all kinds of things, Roland, right? The poll we did, and we were doing one every month with our Black You Vote. Young people, it may not be the polls you see on the news, but we weren't seeing her down like what they were saying in those polls. And in the Essence poll that we did, she with millennials, she was still almost was tied for one of the top three. So I don't buy just waiting on the polls, because at the end of the day, it's the vote. And so what I would say, as a black woman, I'm very disappointed, but but also have to respect the sister for stepping up and realizing she couldn't take it to the next level. we have to also ask ourselves, why was she targeted so? I felt, in many ways, she was, yes, women have a hard time, but at the end of the day, when she was polling higher in some of those more broader opinion polls, she still wasn't getting the kind of coverage she should have gotten.
But
Right?
something happened here. Look, let's go, because Eljo, let's look at this. The first, coming out of the gate, in the first 3 months, the highest rated town halls on MSNBC and CNN were Senator Kamala Harris. Out of all the candidates, highest rated. So clearly there were people who wanted to hear from her, see what she had to say. I think if you start looking at, you're absolutely right in terms of coverage, but also I think there were some fatal mistakes. One that really jumped out. Obviously, there were people who were focusing on her record as a prosecutor.
Right.
But she did not release a criminal justice reform plan until the Monday before the debate at TSU in September. You open in March. If that's your weakest link, if you will, or how folks are going to attack you, you cannot go 5 or 6 months and not have a criminal justice plan.
Yeah.
I think when you start looking at that, I think that was a huge deal because the narrative, her campaign, they allowed the narrative to be established before they established it.
Yeah. Well, there are obviously some mistakes in the campaign, and you can, while you're doing the campaign, you think you're making the right decisions in terms of that. And those of us on the outside are saying, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? But let's also set the landscape of where we are in this race as well. Something that I try to keep reminding people, one, about the polls, right, is that how the polls and sort of the media coverage have an effect, particularly on base Democratic primary voters, particularly on black voters, on whether or not you can win. Right. And so how that drives,
electability is an issue.
The electability is an issue, particularly with older black folks, as we saw in the presidential election with Barack Obama, where he didn't poll until, later because there was, can he win?
Right.
So that's one instance. I think the other thing is because we have so many candidates and have so many candidates that have, there's not very much light and day between a lot of the primary candidates. There's some nitpicking you can do in terms of one person's plan over the other. But the other thing is I find both anecdotally and you can see in the conversation, people have not just one candidate but they have like 3 or 4 and I can walk in the booth and make a decision.
Right.
And that's a different political landscape, right, than I have my one candidate and this is it.
Right.
Those numbers, I think, are soft. Even the Biden numbers, I think, are soft. Because people will go in the booth and say, I have these options. Even myself, like before I came out in support of Kamala, I knew, okay, if I had to go in the booth and choose between these 3 or 4, I could do that. And I think a lot of the electorate is going to be that way in this political landscape because people are looking for, in trying to trade between the candidates, but there's not a lot of difference that you can say starkly, I'm for this person or this person. Now, I agree with you that there are things on the campaign that could have, I share your frustration talking about how strong she should have been and could have been in terms of her criminal justice record, because I feel like there's a lot of things, and as you saw in the town hall we did with her in South Carolina, she addressed some of those things. And I heard from people who said, I wish she would have said that earlier. I wish she was, I wish she talked about that earlier. So those are things, having run numerous campaigns, where you go back and think about, man, we should have did this, or if I had the resources to do that. But in terms of the landscape of all of that collectively, the collectiveness of raising money, the collectiveness of the landscape of how polls and media attention is being used in this race, being black, being a woman, being of color, and sort of how all of the candidates of color in this race have been treated and focused on, right? Were there so many obituary articles written about Beto before he dropped out? Right? There are problems with a lot of the other campaigns, right? But the hyper focus of all of those on that.
Glynda, I'll say this here, and I love the people who are posting comments saying, Roland, you were not saying this before. I'm like, well, no, you're not paying attention, because I did. One of the things that I have said, and this applies to Senator Harris, but also Senator Booker, is that I am a firm believer of how do you lock down your base. That when you run for president, and I also, again, y'all, you can go pull the tape. I told everybody in year 3 of Obama, the next black candidate who runs for president is not going to have the same runway as Obama.
Right.
I said, y'all, go pull the tape. I said it on TV One. I said it on Tom Joyner as well. But here is one of the things that I wish Senator Harris had done and Booker had done. And I said it in real time because I was trying to get them on. I believe the two of them also made a mistake in that they did not cultivate their black base 2 and 3 and 4 years ago. What I mean by that, Glynda, everybody knew she was going to run for president. I felt if I was on her staff, I would have said, Senator, we hitting every black major convention between now and when we announce it. We're going to go talk to the National Medical Association about health care, National Bar Association about mass incarceration, National Dental Association about, dental hygiene. We don't talk to every frat, every sorority. We're going to all these black groups because just because they were black senators, they were different from Obama. He wins in 2004, major speech at the DNC convention, and he also was basically the biggest black star on the political landscape. Well, after he becomes president, it ain't the same. And so I think the lack of cultivating black people beyond New Jersey and California also, I think, had an impact because had they done so, more black folks would have known about them. I can tell you, I was begging them to come on Tom Joyner during the hearings, during the Jeff Sessions confirmation. Couldn't get them to come on. And I'm like, y'all should be on black radio. It took us 9 months to get her to come on TV One News One Now. And I kept saying, y'all gonna need black media. Again, cautionary tale, black politicians, lock down your base before you announce because your base is what sustains you during rough times. Glynda, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Don't forget we're living the post-2016 election cycle, right? So I think when it's all said and done, everyone thought that we would have 4 to 8 years of Hillary Clinton. So if you look at the field, the Castro, Harris, and Booker, in theory, were 2024 candidates, right? And I think their strategy initially was like, how do we, govern in a way that allow us to prepare for 2024? Well, enter in the election results in 2016, which then created a window for candidates to run in 2020. So I sometimes imagine what would 2024 look like for those 3 candidates in particular. I do agree. I think we were living in some of the most politically toxic and racially divisive times. And so they were digging in and doing their work as senators. I think, again, she's going to have lessons learned. There are going to be a ton of thought pieces that Joy will probably put out. I'm trying to figure out what we're writing and what Melanie. So it will be the lessons learned from this. Yes. But ultimately, it's like, how do you pivot and be ready? So ultimately, when you look at the field, you have a Bernie Sanders and a Joe Biden who've been on the scene forever, right? Not only as this national leaders, but also as presidential candidates. You had a Warren who, frankly, was ready to go in 2016. Right, which made her and her campaign and her team like prime for 2020. But imagine this: these candidates were fully funded, and the ability to reach voters. Not only, Senator Harris had moved to Iowa and was doing the door-to-door and the small conversations because she was the biggest asset on the ground. Imagine a Harris campaign or a Booker campaign with enough resources to do the amount of social media ads and actual media buys to be able to be in living rooms and on computer screens across this country to be able to introduce themselves not only to black voters and black women in particular, but to the larger electorate. All things are possible with a couple of dollars. I
want to bring in Monique Presley here. Then I'm going to go. I know y'all want to jump in. So just hold on. Monique, on that particular point, though, she was raising money. She was in the top 4 after the first debate. Then it went downhill from there. Your assessment of what happened, and not just your thoughts about her pulling out today.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a good day. Joy, Melanie, I think what is important for viewers for your show is this. Don't be upset about the fact that she's not in the campaign.
Okay, actually, Monique, hold on one second. I did not realize, I thought we had Congresswoman Karen Bass for later in the show.
Okay.
I did not realize she was on. Pull her up, please.
Lord, don't make her wait.
No.
Okay, she has votes. Here's the deal, though. Okay, fine. So she has votes. We'll try to get her on a little bit later, so I'll send her a text. Monique, go ahead.
I am seeing people complaining who did not donate. Shut up. What are you talking about? What does this mean to you if your entire contribution is lip service on Twitter, which most of the donating public isn't even on? I mean, we're aiming for, and L. Joyce knows way more about this than I do, for different demographic, different age group, et cetera, many of whom are not even participating on social media. But I see all these people saying what a shame it is, and now there won't be any black person in the debate in December, and she had already qualified to be on that stage.
And Corey's already said that he's basically almost at the end of his rope.
But
I'm sorry, Senator Booker, go ahead.
So I have certain feelings as somebody who, the minute she announced, started donating, because and I'm not going to only donate to one campaign, but to me, if it's important, then you know what it takes, people, to support something that's important. If your nails are important, then the lady doesn't take. It's really important for me to get my nails done. It's hard, cold cash. So I was just there. I know Joy was in South Carolina. I was in Atlanta. I was at the Black Women's Power Breakfast, but then also at a small group fundraiser, and she was very candid. Senator Harris was very candid about the fact that these folks who don't have anything to say at all had been on TV for weeks, some of them months, in Iowa, and their ad, which was bomb, fantastic ad, was not even on yet because the money wasn't there. So this show is about the black community. We should be supporting our own. You didn't have to get all in with her in order to support her. So I'm all for this, what she should have done, but what about what we should have done? When you look at that stage in a couple of weeks and you don't see her there, that's on you.
Wait, but I just heard the fact that in a couple of weeks,
I was going to
out
say,
of the 4 people of color who running, the only one left standing is Andrew Yang. Yeah. Booker, Harris, and Castro will not be on that stage. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I want to pivot a bit to talk about the diversity of our votes, right? So as Melanie mentioned, the polling that they were doing and seeing the breakout of different generations of who they were supporting is important to note. We say a lot, and those of us in the organizing and political space, that black voters are not monolithic, right? And you also have to compete, as you mentioned, for our votes. Like, we ain't just checking because you black, right? So, there is some thought process behind how we're voting.
Because black folks did not vote for Braun or Sharpton in 2004.
Exactly. Right. So we understand electability. We understand also investing. And then you can see at the different generations how people support differently. And that's why I think it's really important to, as I mentioned, talk about the political landscape. I also, to your point about investing, this is why Higher Heights exist, right? We call ourselves, we're the political home for black women, whether they're running as candidates or also as voters, right? And sort of getting people in the habit of that political stewardship, that is not just your vote that you can voice politically with, but also your dollars, whether it's $5 a month or whoever. And as someone, I contribute to 4 campaigns throughout this process, just to make sure that they are continually in the conversation or on the debate stage,
heard.
and that their voice is heard, and particularly that they have a different aspect. The last thing I will say, and as I'm going to pivot to this tomorrow, is without a Black woman in the race, and I'm just talking about the Democratic primary right now, which is largely where we vote so far, right? Because who knows what that's going to be 10 to 15 years from now. So even y'all folks that tweet and talk about we on the plantation and all that stuff like that, that hasn't always been the case from a historical standpoint. We know how to vote what's in our best interest.
Right.
And the Democratic Party happens to be the best interest at this
And
moment.
the Republican Party has said in my presence, nobody hates us more than Black people.
Right. So,
Like, no, that was a quote.
right. So get some better policies
Right
and some
about
better
now.
candidates, and maybe we'll consider it. Until then, bye.
Yeah.
Right? So besides that, I think to your point about how do you appeal to the varying political constituencies that exist within the Black community is important as well. To not just thinking about Black voters as this catch-all that you can grab, but particularly how you're going to do a message and an investment, particularly with Black women at different stages of their lives, at different stages in age, at different stages in profession, and how you're going to build an operation to really speak to us. Now, without any of us on the stage, how does that happen, and how are our voice still leveraged in this current race without a Black woman on the stage?
Melanie?
I will say this. The candidates left are going to have an even harder time with Black women. That's what I'm getting. The fact that we're not going to have that voice. I think about Atlanta. I was in Atlanta for the last debate, and being in Atlanta, being in the South, child of the South, and I'm listening. I'm looking at Andrew Young and this one and that one and King family there, Laurie, all of that history. If it wasn't for Senator Harris and Senator Booker, our issues would never have really been discussed.
But here's what's interesting, though. But you bring
and
that up, though. But
and so,
we were
so
in the city where Keisha Lance Bottoms is the mayor. But even though Senator Harris came to Atlanta, the next day at y'all breakfast, she talked about numerous times she came to the campaign for, she's endorsed Biden.
and that's
Right. No, I'm just making a point there.
Right,
so here's an example of a Black female senator saying how she vigorously campaigned for Keisha Lance Bottoms to become the second Black woman mayor of Atlanta, who endorsed Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Black folks.
Right. But my point is, because we're not going to have a Kamala Harris on the stage, Senator Harris on that stage, and barely looking like
Booker's
not going to make it, right? So then we have to what? We got to focus on what's left. And we got between now and South
Biden,
Carolina,
Sanders,
right?
Warren,
this is what we got.
Judge, Klobuchar.
White folks, right? That's what we got, right? A whole lot of white folks
who can't win without our votes.
Our vote,
right?
We have to demand from these candidates. We have to push even harder because there's nobody that's going to make it to be on be the nominee for the Democratic Party without Black women. And so I think we have to shift. I'm disappointed, but it's like, okay, move forward. Okay.
Glynda?
Challenge. You won't win without us.
Glynda, go ahead.
2020 is absolutely powered by Black women. And there's a couple of things I think we need to do. If we're going to do a call to action for this day, in the spirit of not only Shirley Chisholm's unbought leadership, but for Senator Harris, is that we need to ensure that these candidates that remain invest in having serious conversations with Black women. I do believe that in this election cycle, there has been more coverage, both in mainstream media and on shows like yours, talking about Black women and the issues that we care about. So we need to continue to have that conversation. I will say the direct correlation to that is that the candidates recognize that the building blocks to a winning coalition starts with Black women, but it's also there are more Black women on presidential campaigns in leadership roles than we've seen in history's past, and so that has allowed, I think, campaigns to have these candidates to have a level playing field to talk about candidates. But you're going to need to come knock on my door. You need to actually come knock on it tomorrow. Come in, have a cup of tea, and have conversations with me, my aunts, my sisters, my sorors, my church mothers about the issues that we care about. Secondly, there are Black women running up and down this ballot. And so if we don't want to continue to see campaigns in like Kamala Harris. Find a candidate that inspires you. It might be a Black woman running for a school board, or it might be a woman running for Congress, and make a political budget and shift some of your economic power to political giving. And finally, it is us ensuring that we don't go to the polls alone, that we organize in a way in early states so that people recognize that Black women are going to be a force leading into Super Tuesday.
I want to bring this up, and I just want to see what you have to say about this here. You talk about the candidates. The reality is that Russian troll farms continue to play a role in this election.
Mm-hmm.
She was targeted more than anybody else. More than Biden, more than Sanders, more than Warren. Seems that Putin in Russia was kind of scared of this Black woman.
I don't know if it's that they are scared of her or that, just like the Mueller report revealed, that anybody looking to infiltrate our election or our country knows that the third rail in the United States is that of race, and particularly those issues facing African Americans, because we saw that in the Mueller report about how we were targeted on social media and others in general. Right. So and I agree with you. I mean, just tweeting about Kamala today, the amount of my regular comments and from the folks who think she wasn't, like real folks. So it's real folks commenting and critique. And I don't want to disregard folks that had real critique of her candidacy and therefore endorse somebody else. Like those folks exist, and I'm not erasing that. But there is also the issue of, as soon as I started talking about it, and not even hashtagging her name, that there was direct sort of engagement in my Twitter feed and other because I was talking about her. That is a very real fact and something that I don't think a number of people are paying real attention to about how we use social media, which Black folks are a primary user of social media, and therefore how our communities and our conversations were targeted in the 2016 election, and how we are not completely built up and have a real frank conversation about doing that for this election cycle at all.
We're not ready. We're not ready to deal with it.
Absolutely. The misinformation that's been targeted towards African Americans and particularly Black women is happening and will continue to happen. Yep. And one thing that we need to do as just regular individuals is check what you're forwarding. Like, if I see something that's not from a major outlet, I actually still even check major outlets. Just do some fact checking before you share, because we are micro influencers. And when you share something, particularly Black women, Nielsen stated in their 2017 report that people look to Black women for leadership. And so when we share something on our social media feed, our network is using us as an authentic messenger. So check before you share.
I want to bring in someone, y'all have seen her. She's getting mic'd up. Reecie Colbert. She, of course, has been sharing her thoughts on social media. Let's just say she cussed a whole bunch of people out today after news drop of Senator Harris dropping out. You being one of her most ardent supporters. Not a good day for you.
No, very tough day. But, I had to give Senator Kamala Harris her props first, and then I cussed people out second, because it's still a historic campaign that she's run. I'm incredibly proud of her. I think all of us in the K-Hive are. So I think, I've been watching the show on the way up here, and I think we can talk about coulda, woulda, shouldas, but I'm very proud no matter what.
What particularly ticked you off the most over the last several months with the criticism or attacks on her?
Well, I call it Operation Block the Black Woman. And I think that when you look at the outsized social media attacks, she's received 68% of the social media attacks of all the candidates. And yet she's only received 3% of the media mentions. And there's no telling how much of those media mentions are actually positive versus negative. So I think that when we're talking about the level of attacks that she received versus the ability to counter those attacks, it just wasn't a level playing field. So that was the most frustrating part, is that she just didn't even have a level playing field at all. in addition to being a Black woman, just the sheer volume of attacks against her is very hard to surmount. She opened huge support. I think we should have the video, right, folks? When she opened her campaign, massive rally that took place in Oakland. Roll that if you have it, please. And again, this thing started off in a huge way. As somebody who's followed it, where do you think it veered off the path, from your perspective? I think there are a couple of things. I think you mentioned earlier she had the highest ratings in terms of her town halls, so the interest was there. I think that the media didn't want to feed that interest as much, and that's why her media mentions went down. But I do think that perhaps the debate with the moment with Joe Biden was a turning point. I call that back of the bus primary, where I think that people reacted very strongly to her challenging our history, our bucking up, I guess, as a Black woman and saying, you know, hey, this is our history and we're going to respect that and honor that. And I think that that got backlash from Black people as well as white people. So I think that once people started to realize, like, hey, that little girl was me, is a Black woman on the stage running for president, the energy kind of shifted a little bit. You talk about, and anyone can jump in here, you talk about the impact. That was the case when you had the debate there in Atlanta. And the reality is here. There were a lot of young Black women who were greatly motivated by seeing her on that stage and running. What do you think that will mean for next generation, to, even though she's dropped out, to see her run?
She's moved the ball forward.
Melanie, then Glynda, go ahead.
Yeah, she's moved the ball forward, which is what I kind of mentioned earlier. I said, even with all the disappointment, I thank her for being bold and stepping in and stepping up and running. And she was highly qualified, no doubt. And she commanded the stage. She may not have gotten all of the coverage we know she should have gotten. It's an issue. It's an issue for us as Black women to figure out how we work even more closely together to figure this thing out. Because at the end of the day, you know, she's still a senator. I can't wait to see when the impeachment starts for 45, because she will be in. She'll be in the room
on the Senate side.
And so because I remember being in that room during the Kavanaugh hearing, and her stepping up and being able to, you know, wanted to jump up and holler, but, you know, just being able to see this sister command the stage. And so I think, you know, and she's young, she's relatively young, so, you know, who knows, right? May not be the last time.
Glynda, will I go to you guys? Go to my iPad. This is a photo I shot of Senator Kamala Harris speaking with a young Black girl. We were in Atlanta after that breakfast. And I think that photo says it all in terms of the impact of seeing that young lady, seeing someone look like her on that stage. Glynda, go right ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that. That little girl was in her Sunday best. First of all, I think the candidacy of Stacey Abrams, the candidacy of Kamala Harris, creates the possibilities that exist for little Black girls across this country. As relates to Stacey Abrams, the little Black girls that wear their hair natural, as Stacey says, is, you know, who sturdy stature. They are changing what the face of leadership looks like for generations. But it also shows that there's work to be done. Executive level leadership is a place that needs investment for Black women. You know, in our country's history, there's only been 15 Black women that have held statewide executive offices in this country. And as you know, we've never
15?
had 15 in our country's history. And we've never had a Black woman seated governor. We've had a Black woman actually elected governor. So there's work to be done. If we are telling young Black women to step off the sidelines to run for office, that we need to create that pipeline so that our city council members, our state legislators, that our congressional members have pathways to the White House. And I think Stacey and Kamala have changed the playbook for that, and frankly have inspired young Black girls across this country to recognize, like, there's going to be a generation of young Black women that don't remember a time when there weren't Black women that were running for governor or that weren't running for president.
Final comment, El Joy.
you know, I tweeted about this in the beginning of this race. I often had to check in with my own self before I was a supporter of Kamala. And I often had to check in with myself and ask myself, did I have a higher expectation for Kamala than I did for any of the other candidates? Right? Did I want her to be the perfect Black candidate, the perfect Black woman candidate? And were the critiques that I was given, were the thought process on whether I support her, was it fair? And that's something that we have to think about, going to your point as well, right? Is thinking that, am I letting other people off the hook, all the other white candidates or other candidates with 2 bullet points of experience? Am I letting them off the hook because I want only the best? Right, to come and represent me. And it was during that real conversation with myself and how I was analyzing her campaign, her candidacy, and her record, to then coming to the decision to, and that's something that we as voters have to do. As Glynda said, we're going to see more Black women step up, because this generation that's here and the one coming up are much more bolder, much more willing to step out and take the risk to run and to demonstrate their leadership. And we're going to see that more. And from a voter's perspective, we have to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, do we have a higher bar for them than we do for everybody else?
All right, Joy, Melody, Glynda, I certainly appreciate y'all joining us. Monique and Reecie, hold tight 1 second. I'm going to go to a break, folks. Thanks a bunch. Just so y'all know, Joy has sent a tweet out, said, well, hell, I'm in D.C. by myself. So she said, let me just go to my hotel and have this damn creme brulee before I go to dinner. I call Joy. I'm like, get your ass over here. Since you trying to commiserate, come on over here and get on the show. I'm like, where you at?
Really, sis?
I'm like, get over here.
It's like, hey.
So again, I appreciate being on the show.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
All right, folks, it's the holiday season. This is when you think about spending time with your family and friends. This is also when you count your blessings and support those less fortunate. This year, be a holiday hero and change someone's life forever. Right now, hundreds of thousands of Americans are sitting in jail without being convicted of a crime. Why? Because they lack the financial resources to pay their bail. Think about it. When you're arrested for any minor offense, you will be taken directly to jail. If you don't have bail money, you will stay there until a court date is scheduled. That could be days, weeks, or even months. Simply put, America's bail system is broken for people of color. And folks, freedom should be free. That's why the Ebony Foundation has partnered with the Bail Project and is sponsoring the Home by the Holiday campaign. The Bail Project has helped bail out thousands of people over the years, and with your help, they plan to bail out 1,000 people by New Year's Day. Now, how's that for a holiday gift? A donation from you today can change someone's life tomorrow. Now, folks, did you know people of color represent 50 to 90% of the jail population across the country? Without bail, nearly 90% of those charged with misdemeanors pled guilty. However, with paid bail, less than 2% receive a jail sentence. Sometimes justice just needs us. To be a holiday hero, you can donate $25, $50, or more to help the Ebony Foundation bring our brothers and sisters home by the holiday. To donate, go to homebytheholiday.com. It's homebytheholiday.com.
Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.